I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Shri Bidyut Bose, the founder of Niroga Institute in California, will be covering the topic, Is Yoga Secular? Religion involves institutional teachings and traditions associated with specific teachers and books. Spirituality, on the other hand, involves universal secular questions of the human spirit. Who am I? Who are you? And what is the relationship between us? Does this make yoga a religion? Today we will continue to explore the dangers of such a misperception of yoga.
Immediately, got the ball rolling. Within a week, he was getting Social Security. I had changed my hours at work. He was going to therapy. My whole life revolved around him. But when he was done, I would just find something else to latch on to. And men, friends, but it was always self-destructive. It didn't matter what, it was like I was so used to being responsible that I didn't want to be responsible anymore. I just wanted to kind of let things go. It was my son's third brain surgery. And I started going to therapy because I realized that there was a problem. And I decided to try yoga. I just wanted to feel peace. And I didn't know how to, I had never seen it before. Growing up in a household where we were raised, me and my sister, it was just us and my mom. And she was on drugs, and we had to really, really work together to, kind of survive. I felt peace for the first time, and I guess I just chased after it. And so when I decided to become a yoga instructor, I had no idea that the program was going to navigate from the inside out. And I mean from inside my heart and my innermost, deepest feelings and whatever I was going through. And so I would get these homework assignments and I would procrastinate because I was really scared to go in that deep. I had never asked myself these questions. What am I feeling, or what makes me happy? I didn't even know what makes me happy. I remember I seen this motorcycle accident one time. When I seen him, flip on the bike, and he jumped up, the only thing that I could think was, that's adrenaline. And you think when adrenaline is pumping through your body, you can do anything. But as soon as you settle down and you allow the adrenaline to leave, you're stuck with the reality. You can't move. It's too hard. That was my life, running off of adrenaline. And yoga forced me to stop and really acknowledge, like, I'm in pain and I have to heal. And so if that is me laying in the bed crying today, that's my yoga. Tomorrow, the pose will be beautiful. But today, my body says relax. That's how I incorporated it into my life. It offered something to my life that I couldn't get from anywhere else. And to think that I could bring that to other people, where do I sign up? When I become an instructor, I would like to target single mothers and communities that don't really have the opportunity to experience something different. There are not a lot of African Americans who are really into yoga, especially that we're getting younger and younger, having babies, and just in these really stressful situations, because we don't know anything different. This is what our moms went through, and this is what our moms' moms went through, and we don't know how to break the cycle. And so being able to show you that you have a choice, and show them what peace is so that they can get a taste of it, because once you get a taste of it, you can't let it go. You're like, no, I need to get back to that mat so that I can feel what I felt that day. I currently teach a yoga class at my apartment building. It's free and it's open to the public for anybody to come, and I try to illuminate the room with love and comfort so people can feel comfortable being vulnerable, because you're vulnerable in yoga. You have to be. Like, you can't experience the real yoga until you let down your guard and you're able to just allow yourself to be. That's what yoga is about. Being okay with what you have to offer and extending it to the person next to you on the mat, or when you walk out the door, the peace that you got on that mat, extending that out. Yoga is love. I guess that's not Yoga was my yellow brick road. It was my beginning, and as much as it's done for me, I just hope that one day that I could play that role for somebody else.
Students that come to us and the kinds of teachers that we craft. Bit by bit, wide range. Deb, dealing with a child with serious challenges, special needs, coming out of the projects, single mother, traditionally from the Bible Belt, and yet not only embracing a practice that is different, that is coming from the other end of the world, but then preparing to take it to others that also are from all kinds of different traditions. And so it begs the question, is this a universal practice, really? And you know what prompted some of this was just about a year ago in this neck of the woods, there was a conference on mindfulness and education. And researchers who are evaluating our work in so many schools, working with thousands of students, said, VK, you'll have to present at this conference. The participants at that conference will need to know about Niroga's work and its impact. I said, I don't know who's organizing this. I said, we do. We'll connect you with them. And so they sent off an email, and the organizer of the conference came back with a cryptic note. I said, oh yes, Niroga. We know about them. But yoga isn't secular enough for us. And so they decided to keep us out of the conference. And so some thoughts on this debate, perhaps, around what mindfulness is, what meditation is, and what yoga is, for heaven's sake, so that we have some clarity on this conversation, because God knows there's enough work to be done. And we need to stop bickering about who's more secular than another, and perhaps unite under the banner of transformative practice. And so let's see. Quick definitions, just so we are calibrated. Mindfulness, a word somewhat recently cooked up, partly to scrub meditation of sacredness and make it a bit more secular. What is mindfulness, after all? The idea that you're aware of what you are doing as you're doing it. It's very, very simple. Present moment awareness, what you're feeling, as you are feeling it, not before, not after. What you're thinking, as you are thinking it. So that's typically what we talk about when we say mindful. What is meditation? Again, essentially two processes. If you take away all of the details of techniques of meditation, Vivekananda talks about this quite a bit, and so do so many other teachers. It is not what you're meditating on. It's how. You could be meditating on a dot on a wall. You could be meditating on the image of your beloved. It doesn't really matter. And so two essential processes. One is focused attention. That's been talked about. Some object, some thought, some idea that you are staying focused on. The other, open monitoring. The idea that thoughts are coming up, rising on the surface of your mind, staying for a bit, and then melting away. It's the very nature of thoughts. Transient, just like a wave. And so you're just watching that process, much like the slides on this screen, without getting attached, without getting caught. If the thought is a boat that's just flowing down a river, that you're not hopping on that boat to get from Tibet to Timbuktu. You're just watching on the bank. And so these two practices, essential practices, where of course you do need focused attention to be able to do the open monitoring. So there's a connection between the two. And then let's look at yoga. as it's been defined so many times, and you know the root of the word and all of that, the idea that it's about connection, connecting to who we really are, as opposed to who we think we are most of the time. Secondly, connecting to the other, those around us. People, plants, animals, animate, inanimate, it doesn't particularly matter. Connecting with everything. So let's see what next. Broadly, the 4 yogas. This is not about Iyengar yoga and Ashtanga yoga and all the other brands that people are busily creating day by day. You could easily, add your name as a prefix to yoga and create a new brand today. So this is not about marketing. What are the essential practices? Using the techniques of head, heart, hand, and mind. Jnana yoga, the path of knowledge. What is the essence of Jnana yoga? You identify what is fleeting, and you don't cling to it. You identify what is evanescent, and if you're really convinced it is evanescent, you know it's not going with you. Then let go. Bhakti yoga. The yoga of love, of devotion. Most of our love is shopkeeping. It's barter. I love you, but would you love me back? So get rid of that. Of course you will love passionately. Not attachment is not indifference. It is about loving and loving passionately, but unconditionally. There's the rub. What is karma yoga? The yoga of action. Most of us are working for the fruits of the action, the results, the motive, the bonus, the extra pay, the name, the fame, but the subtler or more concrete. And we work with a little bit of non-attachment to the results. And yet work intensely, work ceaselessly, work tirelessly, but with a little hint of selflessness, without a sense of doership, a bit more, like an instrument, without a sense of ownership of the results of the work, a bit like a trustee. And finally, Raja Yoga, the yoga of mindfulness, the science of mindfulness. Watching the waves, those vrittis, and even just simply watching with a hint of non-attachment has an incredible impact on slowing that process down and creating those bits of space between thoughts that encapsulate an eternity. Looking at Raja Yoga, again on that same theme, that same question, is it secular? What are the practices? The foundation is built on a few do's and don'ts. Simple, universal, non-attachment, truthfulness. What's not secular about them? Every one of those yamas and niyamas, the top 10 in Patanjali's list, are essential secular practices, creating a foundation for the practice. And then asana and pranayama, moving and breathing. Can you see anything non-secular about them? And then you find 3 more steps as we lead towards self-realization. Pratyahara, introspection, a little gathering in of this racing outward going mind. Deepening, introspection creates concentration. And then, as concentration deepens, we get meditation. And so when John Kabat-Zinn says yoga is meditation, let's just take a moment and realize that yes, of course, yoga is meditation, but it's a lot more. So let us continue. Given this framework of the 4 main yogas, not the brands that we typically talk about, what is it after all? It is dynamic because it involves movement, and yet the essence of it is that it's transformative. It's changing us from the inside out. It is mindfulness, it is meditation, and quite a bit more. Anchored in mindfulness, connecting with your breath, emerging in movement. That is the essence of yoga, of Raja Yoga. It's not so much about whether my downward dog is more beautiful than yours, or whether my little yoga therapy protocol is more effective than yours. It doesn't particularly matter, just as in meditation, as to what you're meditating on. Just about any movement that you do mindfully and that connects with your breath, will have a profound impact on your body, on your mind, on your spirit, all the way down to your DNA. That's been eminently proved. The latest research in neuroscience, epigenetics, trauma research, somatic psychology, and more. So we've talked a little bit about mindfulness, meditation, and yoga, which is a subset of which, instead of getting into that, as I said, perhaps think of all of these. The essence of the objective is transformation. Starting out, of course, with personal transformation, self-transformation. Yes, yoga was born in India. And yet, Vivekananda reminds us eloquently, it's fine to be born in a religion or to a tradition, but it's not okay to die in it. And in exactly that same way, it's fine for yoga to come out of India from a tradition that's thousands of years old. And yet, no religion, no philosophy, no country, no teacher can contain it. If it is indeed a universal practice. The point is, just as the first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita starts out with the yoga of despondency, of suffering, of sorrow, which is the reality of our existence. How profoundly universal is that? That dissonance, as modern philosophers talk about, is almost a necessary condition for us to disembed from where we are, to then attach, to embed to a higher level of consciousness. It's a process of conscious evolution, that letting go so you can move to the next step, move forward. And so the profound questions are quite universal. Who am I? And who are you? What is our connection? That exploration is yoga. And so the power of transformative practices. Somatic psychology reminds us that an integrated approach to information processing that combines the kinesthetic, the emotional, and the cognitive is an optimal treatment response to chronic stress and traumatic stress. You know how endemic both are in our communities, in our lives. God knows there is enough emphasis on working on our external environments. It's more concrete, it's more palpable. If we're going to change childhood obesity, we go and say we need to make our communities more walkable, well-lit roads. We need parks that are clean, that our children can play in. All of that is the external environment stuff. We can go and cut up ribbons and inaugurate clean parks. But what forces a child to stop fiddling with his Game Boy and actually go and play in the park? That requires a little shift in behavior. It requires a little change towards healthy lifestyles. That is a little different than just the external environment. And so, what I feel strongly is that personal transformation is a prerequisite. It is a necessary condition for social change. If we do it right, it not only impacts healthcare, but has a profound impact on just about every major domain of social function. Education, violence prevention, global sustainability. So why do I say that? A model that most of you are eminently familiar with. You know what is thrown up on the screen, the nucleus and boring electrons around it. My question to you is, where is the power of the atom? Is it in those flying around electrons? Or is it in that tiny little nucleus that, as you know, if you just smash, you're going to unleash a tremendous amount of energy? What does this have to do with yoga? So here's the individual, the I at the core. And you've got these 5 senses that are propelling our minds outward. You see something beautiful, or not so beautiful, and your mind starts to take that in and process. I like it, I don't like it, and so on and so forth. The same with all of our 5 senses. Neuroscientists are looking at this and they're saying, well, we think we have a few more senses than just these 5. What are some examples as we start to look at this I a little closer? The 6th sense that they identify is what they're calling bodily states. What are these? If you're really scared, you find your heart pounding. That's not one of your basic 5 senses, but you can absolutely feel it. It is a bodily state. Similarly, if you're nervous, a major presentation coming up or what have you, you can feel those butterflies in your tummy. This is very real. This is not theory. What next? As you go further in, mental states. We can all relate to that. I'm sad, I'm happy. I'm stressed, I'm relaxed. I'm anxious, I'm calm. I'm distracted, I'm focused. These are all mental states, and yet they're not part of your core 5 senses. As you move further into the core, the next layer perhaps you could think of is self-awareness. What is that? The essential difference between I am sad and I'm feeling sad. How often do we mix them up? And yet there's a gulf of difference between the two. When my toe hurts, I stub my toe, I say my toe hurts. I don't typically say I hurt. But when it comes to our mental states, how often do we completely get overwhelmed by the emotion and completely identify with it? And so this business of separating my emotion from me, the experiencer of the emotion, is profound. What happens is you start to get a little bit more established in self-awareness. I call it self-mastery. The idea that you're acting more often than simply reacting. And as we move in this trajectory from these 5 senses, from the bodily states to an awareness of our mental states, to the separation between what I'm feeling and who I am, and perhaps then acting as opposed to not reacting, what happens as each one of us acts with self-mastery more often is that it allows us to unleash the infinite potential, power that each one of us has. And yet, as I said earlier, it's not just about personal transformation. Who are you? If we can really connect to each other at that foundational level that is built on self-awareness and self-mastery, I believe that that foundation cannot but be made out of anything other than the strong positive emotions that we well know. Love and compassion, gratitude, and service, selfless service, empathy and forgiveness. But that's what builds that connection when you really connect to another. Essence to essence, spirit to spirit. What happens when most of us in an organization, in a community, can start to link at that level, connect at that level, where you really feel interconnected, and you really feel interdependent, not theoretically, not intellectually, not from the throat on up, really in an integrated way that connects all the way down to heart and mind and spirit. Start to get a hint of the Upanishadic reality that we are all one, only appearing as many. And so just imagine an entire community where most of the people are acting with self-mastery most of the time, and potentially arrive at a significant tipping point. And imagine the profound implications of that tipping point for our health, for our well-being. And so yoga becomes a catalyst. Catalysts are amazing chemicals, right? Where one drop can magically transform a reaction without itself getting destroyed. And so imagine a tool, a skill that you can systematically develop that leads you towards self-mastery, opening up the door, the portal for self-transformation. Just imagine millions of yoga practitioners harnessing the powers of head and heart and mind to help us arrive at that tipping point. No one, no organization can do this alone. We need all of us, all of our collective passion and compassion, our vision and our imagination to make that happen. Otherwise, we stand to lose generations of our children and our children's children. How many of those are we going to throw away? And so let us heal ourselves and heal the world with a practice that is profoundly powerful and yet secular one breath, one step, one thought at a time. Thank you.
I agree with you about the, mindfulness teachers say that it's a secular tradition.
Yes.
And yoga is not secular. So this is the argument that they're using on you. Same thing I was approached by a yoga group because I teach mindfulness meditation.
Yes.
So they said, how can we enter this hospital? Could you give me help?
Yes.
So I think this is the situation that you're going to face more and more because mindfulness has become a systematic teaching in 200 hospitals in the country. And though the author, Kabat-Zinn writes in his book, yoga is mindfulness.
Right.
This is Saki also writes, yoga is mindfulness.
So imagine our situation where yoga for the most part in this country is a fitness factor. Body beautiful yoga, yoga abs, yoga butts, and $10 billion worth of business, selling all kinds of things for a practice that doesn't need anything. But see, if even in that state, people are thinking that it's not secular enough, what if they hear the likes of Chris Chappell and others, where we're talking about the philosophy, they would throw us all into the ocean. This is just so crazy. And yet, of course, there are ways in which you can deal with this conversation. When we go in to heads of probation, we go into the sheriff, we go into the heads of education and healthcare. I mean, church and state is right in our face, right? And yet what we're saying is that we're not just saying it's a physical practice, because I know that then that's shortchanging the practice and it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I absolutely say it is a spiritual practice, but let's understand the difference between spiritualism and spirituality and religion. Religion involves, texts and teachers and in the best case, and of course degenerates into cults and fanaticism. And yet the questions of spirituality are profound, already listed over there. Who am I? Who are you? What is our connection? Those are the questions that yoga is exploring. And typically we've had no problem going into a zillion settings where traditionally you wouldn't be able to penetrate, but provided you're very clear on your understanding of what the practice is.
But you should not get discouraged because there was a mindfulness conference in New York City. So they invited all the mindfulness teachers around the country. They invited a group from Baltimore, the people who were teaching yoga to the population that, like you are teaching. And these people are invited as a mindfulness practice. So that being there, it's on semantics. If you have a right approach,
Yes.
these things can stop. Because instead of you presenting them, if your students who are minority, if they approach to present it, they would have stopped it. That exactly happened. I can even find out the organization from Baltimore, these two young gentlemen from the inner city.
Yes, yes.
They come and presented.
The Healing Life Foundation, I know them.
That's right.
Yes.
They presented as a mindfulness, though their practice was teaching yoga.
Yes.
So it's, in a way, this is political. Really, who gets
Part
most
of it.
sick?
And also how we present yoga. Other questions? Yes. Go ahead.
So I just want to thank you for a great presentation, and I'm from the New American Foundation. And one of the things I worry about a little bit is yoga is secular in kind of the same way that Hinduism is secular. They're both imbued with these sort of universal values, and a lot of the stuff you're talking about.
Sorry, what and what again?
Hinduism and yoga are both secular in sort of the same way. But what I worry about is when you go and present this, I think that most born-again Christians are not going to agree with you because their theology is looking at this in a very different way. And when you say that, this is a very universal practice, I agree with you. I mean, I come from the same tradition, and I believe in, Satchitananda. But if you go and talk to someone who says that the most important value is not ahimsa, is not satyam, but is in fact salvation, I just worry that we may be winning the battle, but losing the game if we emphasize too much on the secular components. I mean, it may help us make some inroads, but I worry that what will happen ultimately is then people will say, well, yoga is just a physical thing. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
And I think that's where we have to strike a balance. We have to be very clear what exactly yoga is, and also how it is a spiritual practice that connects body and mind and spirit, and even salvation, what people understand by that, resurrection. All of these are, of course, metaphors, just like we heard about the Bhagavad Gita as a metaphor for most of our battles inside. And so the idea of growing in spirit growing in interconnectedness could be another way to discuss salvation, resurrection, all of that. So it's a process. It's, you won't be able to convince everyone. And by the way, I'm not disheartened when I hear about these competitions for secularism, but it's a process, and one person at a time, right? Yes, you had a question.
Kind of along the same lines, really. I know a woman I worked for a while who said yoga was okay as long as it was exercise, but as soon as you started working with energy and an actual yogi teacher, then it was inviting demons into your body and that kind of thing. And it's, for me, it's like, how do you even start to approach someone who is in that mindset? But I guess my question to you is, in a predominantly Christian nation,
Yes.
are they going to be able to move forward from exercise into more spirituality?
It's a process, and basically, just as the steps of yoga, just as the Bhagavad Gita, the step, Moksha Yoga, the last chapter doesn't start at the beginning, it's at the end. And so, I'll give you a couple examples. Kids in juvenile hall, or kids in school. We are never forcing this on anybody. That's always very clear, that you're free to participate or not in a structured environment where they don't have too many options. Like in juvenile hall, a kid won't want to be staying isolated in a cell. They will want to participate, but maybe not, but afraid. Mother or pastor or somebody has said, don't do yoga. So we'll say, fine, sit it out, or go back to your cell. So they'll typically sit it out. And you can see, they're just itching to join the group, and it happens in school as well. But it's always kind of a process. Bit by bit, they just start to see what our instructors are doing. They're not pounding, all kinds of religious ideas into anybody's head. They're seeing the joy of the practice that's coming out of their peers. They're starting to see that what's being discussed is foundational topics of spirit that they can relate to. And then once they practice it a bit, finding that little safe place inside of them that nobody can touch, no amount of dysfunction can mess up, and you're done. And so I feel there's no problem at all having the physical practice be the door of entry. That's fine. No problem with that at all. But then perhaps, with a little bit of practice, it can go well beyond that. I remember in one of my classes, a woman came in, and she was in her late 60s. I could see right away that she'd been doing yoga for a long time, tremendous flexibility, capability. She did the class, and at the end of it, she comes up to me, introduces herself. She's just come into Berkeley for a few days. She's an emeritus professor at the University of Hawaii, having done yoga for 35 years. She said, why is it that none of my teachers ever told me that yoga was anything more than stretching? And I'm saying, isn't this nice? And this was one class. She got something out of that class that it was something more. So it's a perfect way where you can, room to grow, right? For all of us. Yes.
I'll speak loudly because we're out of battery.
It's a mic, maybe?
My father, he died at Stanford Hospital. Can you hear me?
No.
Go ahead.
Otherwise, Savita will like it.
My father died at Stanford Hospital, and it took him 2 weeks to die. And when he was dying, he wanted comfort in spirituality, and they only offered him Catholic and Christian. And then they said, repent your sins, And they don't offer anything other than that.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, the question was her father died. Actually, it was more like a statement, I guess, a half statement, half question. And her father died in Stanford Hospital, and the last few weeks, when he was about to die, he requested counseling, and the only person they sent was a Catholic counselor. Right? Is that right?
Yeah, Catholic or Christian.
A Catholic or Christian
Nothing
counselor,
spiritual.
and there was nothing spiritual. There was nothing outside of that. So.
I think that needs the hospice being
Yes.
used.
And so we are doing some work with complex grief, with end-of-life care and so on and so forth, to be able to articulate the connections of a practice like this in those settings where, of course, people are, especially when things are falling apart, that's when these teachings become so immediate and so real. And so it's a process, getting to them systematically.
I have a quick comment on that. I am not going to ask any question. I think the root cause for this whole conflict is because of two reasons. One is competition, other one is insecurity. So we have to address that then.
Okay, so Nagaraji's comment was that the root cause of this situation is competition and insecurity.
Yeah.
Insecurity, yeah. So that needs to be addressed if we need to make inroads. Please join me. In the interest of time, we have to cut the session short because we have a panel discussion after this that I don't want you guys to miss, and I don't want Bidyut to miss. So please join me in thanking Bidyut again for a wonderful, wonderful, inspiring presentation, and also for the work that he's doing in this field of bringing yoga to underprivileged neighborhoods. We really appreciate his presence here and his talk. Thank you.